I used to be a freelance developer, which meant I spent about 10 hours a day, every day, cooped up in my ground floor apartment. You get to know a place intimately when you're there that much. I was a total creature of habit. I knew every single creak of the floorboards above me. I could tell you the exact time my upstairs neighbor left for work, just by the sound of their footsteps. I knew everyone's schedule, but most of all, I knew Daisy. Daisy was the little Pomeranian who lived across the hall. And let me tell you, Daisy was a living, breathing alarm system. She barked at everything. The mailman was her arch nemesis. She'd bark at shadows moving in the hallway. I'm pretty sure she barked if someone even thought about breathing too loudly out there. Her barks were just part of the daily soundtrack of my life. So, one Tuesday afternoon, I was deep in a coding sprint, completely in the zone. The sun was hitting my desk just right, the coffee was working its magic, and everything felt peaceful and productive. But then, all of a sudden, my hands just froze over the keyboard. A wave of cold, prickly anxiety washed over me out of absolutely nowhere. It wasn't a sharp, specific fear. It was more of a nagging, persistent feeling of wrongness. You know that feeling when you think you've left the stove on, even though you know you haven't cooked all day. It was exactly like that, but 100 times stronger. I tried to shake it off. I thought, I'm just stressed from work. So, I put on my big noise-canceling headphones, cranked up some focus music, and tried to get back to my code. But the unease only got worse. It was a suffocating feeling, like the oxygen in the room was slowly being sucked out. The music in my headphones felt jarring, and the silence they created felt even louder than the non-existent noise I was trying to block. It was unbearable. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I ripped the headphones off and just sat there in the sudden quiet, listening, really listening, and that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. The silence, it was deafening. I glanced at the clock. It was 2 p.m. Now, 2 p.m. was a very specific time in my building. It was Daisy's walk time. Every single day, like clockwork, my neighbor would take Daisy out, and the hallway would erupt into a war zone of high-pitched, furious barks as she announced her departure to the world. But today, there was nothing, not a single yip, not a whimper, nothing. And it wasn't just Daisy. The neighbor's TV, which usually blared game shows every single afternoon without fail, was also silent. The complete and total absence of this familiar background noise made my stomach physically turn. It was like a piece of the world was missing. My brain, so used to the daily pattern, had subconsciously flagged this huge break in the routine and was screaming at me that something was wrong. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I slowly got up from my chair and crept to my front door, trying to be as quiet as possible. I didn't open it. I just pressed my eye to the peephole, my breath catching in my throat. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. A man in a dark, oversized hoodie was crouched directly in front of my neighbor's door, just a few feet away from mine. He was perfectly still, his back to me, his hands moving with a chilling, professional precision as he worked a set of lockpicks into the cylinder. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It felt like a scene from a movie. I was frozen, watching as he expertly slipped into the apartment like a shadow, without making a single sound. The door clicked shut behind him, and the hallway was silent once more. My mind was racing. I immediately and quietly backed away from the door, grabbed my phone, and locked myself in the bathroom to call the police, whispering the details of what I had just seen. The police arrived incredibly fast. They were quiet and professional, and I could hear them apprehending the guy. It was over in minutes, but the story gets darker. I found out later what happened to Daisy. The reason she was so quiet, the reason for the terrifying silence, was that the burglar had tossed a piece of poisoned meat through the mail slot to silence her, before he even attempted to break in. That thought still haunts me. If I had just kept those noise-canceling headphones on, if I had ignored that weird, gut feeling and just dismissed it as work stress, my door would have been next. He would have finished with my neighbor's place and moved right on to mine. That day taught me a lesson I will never, ever forget. Never ignore the silence. Your intuition is a powerful tool. It's your brain's pattern recognition software running in the background. And when the world goes quiet when it should be loud, when the normal sounds of your life suddenly disappear, it might mean something is very, very wrong. Something might be hunting. So please, listen to that little voice. Pay attention to those feelings of unease. It might just save your life. This story takes place on a rainy Thursday night, and it's the reason I stopped caring if people think I'm rude. I was in the parking lot of a supermarket, loading groceries into my trunk. It was one of those dark, forgotten corners of the lot, and the rain was coming down so hard it blurred everything around me. All I wanted was to finish up and get home where it was warm and dry. Then, out of nowhere, a man appeared. He just sort of materialized out of the rain. He was well-dressed, wearing a button-down shirt and nice slacks, like he'd just come from an office job. He kept a bit of distance, about 6 feet away, and he had this really distressed look on his face. "I am so sorry to bother you," he started, and his voice was actually trembling. "But I've had such a terrible day. I've got this really heavy box of medical supplies, but I just had shoulder surgery, and I can't lift it into my car." He gestured vaguely with his head. "My car is right over there. Could you please just help me for 1 second now? I've always considered myself a good person, someone who helps others." I looked at him. He was handsome, he was polite, and he seemed genuinely injured. My logical brain immediately went, "Of course, you should help him. It's the decent thing to do." But as I opened my mouth to say sure, something happened. My body completely revolted. A violent wave of nausea surged through me, so strong I thought I was going to be sick right there on my shoes. My stomach churned, and it felt like every alarm bell in my system was going off at once. It wasn't a quiet whisper of intuition. It was a full-blown, primal scream inside my head. "Run, now!" But then the social pressure kicked in. I could feel it weighing me down. I didn't want to be that mean person, the one who refuses to help an injured man standing in the rain. Who does that? It felt so wrong, so unkind. But the physical feeling of fear was completely overwhelming. It was a tangible, gut-wrenching dread that I couldn't ignore. "I'm sorry," I stammered, already backing away from him, moving toward my car door. "I can't. I have to go." I didn't wait for his reaction. I didn't give him another look. I slammed my trunk shut, jumped into the driver's seat, and hit the lock button so fast my hand shook. I fumbled with the keys, started the engine, and peeled out of that parking spot. As I was pulling away, my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and what I saw sent a chill down my spine that was colder than the rain. The injured man was standing perfectly straight. All his previous distress was gone. His bad shoulder, the one he supposedly just had surgery on, was moving just fine. He was staring at my car as I drove away, and the look on his face was one of pure, murderous rage. It was a look I will never, ever forget. The second I was a safe distance away, I pulled over and called the supermarket security. I told them what happened, my voice still shaking. They said they'd send someone out and notify the police. About 2 hours later, I got a call back from an officer. They had caught him. They found his car, which turned out to be stolen, and in the back, there was no heavy box of medical supplies. Instead, they found zip ties, a roll of duct tape, and a large hunting knife. That moment was a horrifying wake-up call. I realized that predators like him don't just rely on force. They weaponize our politeness. They exploit our fear of being seen as rude or unkind. They count on us to override our own survival instincts in order to be socially acceptable. My brain tried to talk me into being a victim. It was my stomach, my gut, my body that knew the truth long before my logical mind did. That sudden, violent nausea wasn't just a random feeling. It was a gift. It was my body's ancient, hardwired alarm system screaming that I was in mortal danger. So now, I tell everyone this story. Trust that feeling in your gut, that uncomfortable churn in your stomach, that sudden urge to get away from someone. It's not you being paranoid or rude. It's your survival instinct. It's there to protect you, and you should never, ever apologize for listening to it. Your safety is more important than anyone's opinion of you. Have you ever felt it? That sudden, prickly sensation where the hair on your arms or the back of your neck just stands straight up. It's not just something you hear in ghost stories. It's a real biological response called piloerection, and for one man, listening to it may have saved his life. This is the story of David. David is a corporate lawyer. He lives in one of those sleek, high-rise luxury apartment buildings you see downtown. Life for him is usually pretty structured: long hours, complex cases, and late nights. One particular night, after a marathon trial preparation session, he was heading home. It was almost 2 in the morning. The city was quiet, and the building's grand marble lobby was completely empty, making his footsteps echo eerily. He walked over to the bank of elevators and pressed the button for his floor. A moment later, the doors slid open with a soft chime, but the elevator wasn't empty. There was a man already inside. He was dressed in what looked like a standard delivery uniform, a simple windbreaker, and a baseball cap pulled down low over his eyes. In his hands, he held one of those thermal bags, the kind you see pizza delivery guys use. David lived on the 22nd floor. Normally, sharing an elevator ride, even with a stranger late at night, wouldn't be a big deal in his secure building. He was about to step inside, just like any other night. But then, it happened. A wave of something cold and electric washed over him. The hair on his arms and the back of his neck went rigid, standing on end. It was so sudden, so intense, it felt like a physical shock. Later, when David recalled this moment, he said, "I hadn't processed a specific threat yet." He couldn't point to any one thing that was wrong. The man in the elevator hadn't said a word. He didn't look menacing in an obvious way. There was no weapon in sight, but, as David put it, his primitive brain had already sounded the alarm. It had picked up on something his logical, analytical lawyer's brain had completely missed. What was it? Looking back, David pieced together the tiny, almost invisible clues. Maybe it was the man's posture. He was standing too still, too rigid, with his weight shifted forward, onto the balls of his feet, like a sprinter ready to bolt from the starting blocks. Or maybe it was something simpler. David subconsciously noted that there were no delivery bikes or vans parked outside the building, and the pizza bag, it looked oddly light, sagging in a way that suggested it was completely empty. All these details were just whispers, fragments of information that his conscious mind dismissed. But his body was screaming danger. He froze right at the threshold of the elevator. The doors were starting to slide shut. He had to make a split-second decision: trust his gut, or dismiss it as paranoia and get in. He chose to trust his gut, forcing a nervous, slightly awkward laugh. David started patting his pockets in a mock panic. "Oh, hold on," he said, trying to sound casual. "I think I left my phone in the car. You go ahead, I'll catch the next one." The man in the elevator didn't respond. He didn't nod. He didn't say okay. He didn't even move. He just stared at David from under the brim of his cap with an unnerving intensity. As the polished steel doors slid closed, sealing the man inside, David saw a flash of movement. The man's hand was reaching for the waistband of his pants. A chill ran down David's spine, colder than the initial feeling. He knew he'd made the right choice. He didn't go back to his car for his non-existent phone. He turned and ran straight to the building's security desk, his heart pounding in his chest. He quickly explained his strange encounter to the guard on duty. Less than 10 minutes later, their conversation was interrupted by a piercing alarm. It was the silent panic alarm, triggered from the 15th floor. Security and police swarmed the building. They found the man from the elevator. He had followed a woman who got off on the 15th floor, cornering her in the hallway and brandishing a box cutter. It turned out he was a serial mugger who had been targeting residents of high-end buildings for weeks. His method was always the same: pose as a late-night delivery person to gain access and bypass security, then ambush his victims in the quiet hallways or elevators. David was safe in the lobby, but the reality of what almost happened was terrifying. If he had ignored that primal warning, that strange sensation on his skin, and stepped into that elevator, he would have been trapped with a dangerous criminal for 22 floors. His instincts, that ancient fight-or-flight response, had seen the threat long before his logical mind could ever put the pieces together. This phenomenon, piloerection, is a relic from our evolutionary past. For our ancestors, it made their hair stand on end to make them appear larger and more intimidating to predators. For us modern humans, it doesn't do much to scare off a mugger, but it still serves as a powerful, built-in alarm system. It's our body's way of telling us that something is wrong on a fundamental level, even when we can't explain why. David's story is a chilling reminder to listen to that little voice, to trust that gut feeling. Sometimes, our primitive brain knows things that our logical brain doesn't. It pays attention to the subtle cues, the odd postures, the things that are just slightly out of place. It's a survival instinct we all have. This is the story that still makes me check under my bed every single night. Even now, years later, the memory sends a shiver down my spine. I was a student at the time, living off campus in a creaky old house that had seen better days. It was a classic student rental, you know the type. Drafty windows, floors that groaned with every step, a general sense of unease that you just learned to live with. I was always a heavy sleeper. Seriously, a fire alarm could go off, and I'd probably just roll over. But one night, a Tuesday, I woke up. My eyes just snapped open. I looked at my phone on the nightstand. The glowing numbers read 3:14 a.m. It wasn't a noise that woke me. There was no bang, no crash, no sudden jolt. I woke up because the air in my room felt wrong. It was heavy, thick, almost like you could touch it. I had this suffocating sensation, a primal feeling that the room was no longer empty. It's hard to describe, but it was like a localized pressure in the darkness, a gut instinct telling me I was no longer the only consciousness in the room. My heart started to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. I stayed perfectly still, lying on my back, staring up at the dark ceiling. I didn't dare move a muscle. I didn't even change the rhythm of my breathing. I just listened. The house was old. It was always making noises. The pipes would gurgle. The wood would settle. I was used to that. But this was different. Then, I heard it. It was a rhythmic, incredibly faint sound coming from the corner near my closet. It was human breathing. It was slow and shallow, deliberate, like someone was trying to be completely silent while watching me. Pure terror washed over me. Every instinct screamed at me to jump up, to scream, to run. But a deeper, colder voice in my head, a survival voice, whispered one simple instruction. Be a broken toy. Don't let him know you're awake. If he thinks you're asleep, you have the advantage. My mind raced. How long had he been there? What did he want? The possibilities were all horrifying. Robbery seemed like the best case scenario at that point. I knew I had to get to my phone, but I couldn't just reach for it. He'd see. He'd know. So, I started to act. I let out a soft groan, the kind you make when you're shifting in your sleep. Very slowly, inch by inch, I began to roll over onto my side, facing the wall, away from the corner where the breathing was coming from. My hand was shaking so badly I was afraid the bed would rattle. I slowly slid it under my pillow, where I kept my phone. My fingers brushed against the cool glass screen. The plan formed in my head in a split second. It was a desperate, all-or-nothing gamble. I took a deep, sleeping breath, and then in one explosive motion, I grabbed my phone, rolled off the side of the bed, hit the floor, and sprinted the few feet to my bathroom. I slammed the door shut and fumbled with the lock, my fingers feeling like useless sausages. The click of the bolt sliding home was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I huddled on the cold tile floor, my back pressed against the door, phone clutched in my hand. I could hear my own heart, a wild, frantic hammering that I was sure he could hear through the door. I dialed 911, my thumb barely able to hit the right numbers. When the operator answered, I could only manage a choked whisper. There's someone in my house. In my bedroom. I'm in the bathroom. I tried to give them my address, my voice cracking, tears streaming down my face. I was so terrified he would try to break the door down. I just kept whispering, please hurry, please hurry. Those were the longest minutes of my life. I sat there in the dark, listening for any sound from the other side of the door. Silence. Complete silence. Had he left? Or was he just waiting? Finally, I heard the distant wail of sirens growing closer, closer, until red and blue lights were flashing through the small bathroom window. I heard heavy footsteps on the porch, a loud knock, and then, police open up. I've never felt such relief in my entire life. I stumbled out of the bathroom when they called my name, and the house was suddenly filled with officers. They were professional, calm, which helped ground me a little. They cleared the house room by room, and then they found him. He wasn't under the bed, not in the closet. He was squeezed into the tiny, dark gap behind my old, bulky bedroom sofa, a spot I never would have thought to look. He was a man I'd never seen before. He didn't have a weapon, not in the traditional sense. He didn't have a bag to carry stolen goods. The police found something else. They found a small, spiral-bound notebook. Inside it, in neat, meticulous handwriting, was my entire life. He had written down my schedule, when I left for class, what time I got home. He noted when I turned off my lights each night. He had even timed how long it took for my breathing to change, for me to fall into a deep sleep. The police report said this wasn't the first time. He had been coming into my house for 3 nights in a row. He hadn't come to steal my laptop or my TV. He had been letting himself in, creeping into my bedroom, and just sitting there, in the dark, watching me sleep. He found a strange kind of comfort in it. He told them. The most chilling part for me, the part that still haunts me, is how I woke up. It wasn't a conscious thing. It was my subconscious. It was some deep, animal part of my brain that had kept watch for me while I slept. It had sensed the shift, the change in the atmosphere of the room, and it screamed at me to wake up. It knew, long before I did, that I wasn't alone, so, yeah, that's why I'll probably never feel completely safe in the dark again. It's a stark reminder that, sometimes the monsters are real, and they don't always make a sound. This is the one. The story that taught me that intuition isn't just a whisper of fear, it's about understanding someone else's intent. It's a lesson I learned when I was 19, and it stayed with me ever since. I was back home from college for the summer, house sitting from my parents while they were on a long overdue vacation. It was a big, old house, the kind with creaks and groans you get used to over the years. But I was meticulous about security. Every night, I made my rounds. Windows locked, deadbolts thrown, every single entry point secured, not once, but twice. It was my little ritual, my way of feeling safe when I was the only one there. That night, I finished my checks and headed up to bed around midnight. I fell asleep almost instantly. One of those deep, dreamless sleeps that only happen when you're young and completely exhausted. The house was silent, wrapped in the quiet of the suburbs. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., I was awake, not slowly, not drowsily, but jolted into full, sharp-edged consciousness. It wasn't a loud noise that woke me. There was no scream, no crash, no shattering glass. It was a sound so small, so insignificant, that most people would have rolled over and gone right back to sleep. It was a tiny, mechanical sound click. Just that. A single, sharp click. It was followed almost immediately by another sound, one that was softer, longer. A soft, long inhalation. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart instantly pounding against my ribs like a drum. My room was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows light, but I could see that my bedroom door, which I always shut completely, was now slightly ajar. A thin sliver of even deeper darkness from the hallway, and through that crack, a smell drifted in. It was acrid, smoky, and utterly unmistakable. The scent of cigarette smoke. The terror was absolute and immediate. It wasn't just fear. It was a cold, logical certainty that something was terribly wrong. No one in my family smoked. Not my parents, not my siblings, not me. I was supposed to be completely, entirely alone in that house. My mind started racing, trying to make sense of it. A sound, a smell. It could be anything, right? A faulty wire, something burning in the kitchen. But my gut knew better. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. The click wasn't a house settling. It was a lighter. The long inhale wasn't the wind. It was someone drawing smoke into their lungs. And in that moment, I understood something truly terrifying. If a stranger breaks into your home and is so confident, so brazen, that they stop in your hallway to light a cigarette, they aren't afraid of you. They aren't trying to be quiet. They feel like they already own the place. They feel like they've already won. The act of smoking in someone else's house, right outside their bedroom door, is an act of supreme arrogance. It's a declaration of power. My first instinct, the one you see in movies, was to scream, to grab something heavy and fling open the door, ready for a fight. But my intuition screamed louder. Don't engage. Don't let him know you're awake. Don't give him what he wants. Because this wasn't a simple burglar trying to be stealthy. This was something else. This was someone who wanted a confrontation. My body moved before my brain could argue. I didn't open the door. I didn't make a sound. My hands, shaking but steady, found my phone and my car keys on the nightstand. My bedroom was on the second floor, with a window that opened onto the roof of the front porch. It was an old house, with a sturdy wooden trellis running up the side. Slowly, silently, I slid the window open. The cool night air hit my face. I climbed out, my bare feet finding purchase on the shingles of the porch roof. I didn't look back. I just focused on moving. I slid down the trellis, getting a few splinters in my hands, but I barely felt them. The moment my feet hit the soft grass of the lawn, I ran. I didn't run to my car. I ran to the brightest light I could see, my neighbor's front porch light, which was always on. I pounded on their door, screaming for help, the sound tearing out of my throat after being held in for so long. It felt like an eternity before the lights flipped on and the door opened. The police arrived within minutes. They went into my house, guns drawn, while I stood shivering on my neighbor's lawn, wrapped in a blanket they'd given me. A little while later, an officer came out. He told me they found him. He was sitting on the floor in the upstairs hallway, right outside my bedroom door, just sitting there, leaning against the wall, as calm as you please. He had a backpack next to him, filled with my mother's jewelry he'd taken from her room, and resting on his lap was a large kitchen knife he'd gotten from our knife block downstairs. When they found him, he was just finishing his cigarette. He hadn't tried to run. He hadn't seemed surprised. He was just waiting. He told the police something later that has chilled me to my core ever since. When they asked him what he was doing, what he was waiting for. He said, "I just wanted to see her face when she realized I was there." That's when it all hit me. My intuition hadn't just heard a sound and smelled smoke. It had interpreted the intent behind those things. It understood the audacity, the sheer arrogance of the man sitting in my hallway. He wasn't there just to steal things. He was there for the reaction. He wanted the fear. He wanted the confrontation. He wanted to see the look on my face. By choosing to flee instead of fight, by escaping out the window instead of opening the door, I denied him the one thing he truly wanted. I took away his power. My intuition didn't just save me from a physical threat. It saved me from becoming a part of his sick story. It taught me that sometimes, the smartest and bravest thing you can do is listen to that quiet voice inside you and simply refuse to play their game. That night changed how I see the world. Intuition isn't just a feeling. It's a form of intelligence. It is your subconscious picking up on tiny cues and piecing together a story that your conscious mind hasn't caught up with yet. It's not just about sensing danger, but about understanding the nature of that danger. If you've ever had a moment like this, a time when your gut feeling screamed at you and you listened, share your story in the comments. We can all learn from each other. Thanks for listening, and please always trust your intuition. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Stay safe out there.